Hello everyone, Lucas here with N2B Solutions. Today we're going to go over how to use the Grandstream software to create provisioning files for GXP series phones. Technically this works with all Grandstream products, but we're specifically going to look at the GXP models today. And one of the ones in particular we're going to look at is right behind me, a GXP 1628. Now, each series of GXP phone can be configured using provisioning, and the provisioning file for each series is the same. So if you have any 1600 series phone, you can use the same config file. If you have a 2100 series phone, any of them, they all use the same config file. And we'll take a look at that as we go here. So let's look at what we need. Me here. To start, we're going to go to grandstream.com. I've already opened up the site. We're going to go to support, and we're going to go to tools. This is where you're going to download the pieces that you need. We are going to go down to the XML configuration file generator, and we just click on this link here if we're using Windows, and it will download that generator. That's the tool we're going to use. The other thing we're going to use is right underneath it. It's called configuration template. We're going to download that as well. You will need to re-download the configuration templates every time Grandstream puts out a new firmware version for the phones. So we'll dive right into that. Show in folder. And here we go. The config templates come as a zipped file. I've got a couple other things in here that we're going to use as well. We're going to extract that here. And all of the config templates are in this folder. Whether you're doing the DP phones, which are the cordless phones, the conference phones, the video phones, old ones, new ones, and it puts the firmware version after the series of the phone it is. So way back on the 108 firmware, it was just for the 21XX here, but down here you can see GXP 2130, 40, 60, 70, and 35. All of those models, these are the config files for 109.108, and they even have the newer 109.118, that's the beta. That might be official now, I'm not sure. But each version is on here, and as they update them, they put the newest versions in. We're doing the 1600 series, so if I were to open this, it's all the way up through 132. If I open it, you can see it'll tell you what changes have been made, p-values added since 104, 106. So from 106 to the 132 version, these are all the changes. You can see this little hashtag means ignore this line. It's just showing us changes. So if we actually wanted it to do something, we'd have to get rid of that pound sign or hashtag in front of it. So this first whole section is just to show us these are all of the P-code changes or additions that have been made since the last version. P-values added since 104.67. It goes through and it lists every change since the original config file came out. And it can go down for quite a while. You get through all of those, and you eventually get to the very first bit of configuration we can do. Here, there, now we can see the hashtag's gone in front of it, so it's right above me. Right here, change and log. So this whole section from here on up, it's like a tenth of the whole file. It just shows us changes. And below that is when you start with your account settings. And every setting that's available on a phone is listed here. If I want to make the account active, I set this code to 1, to yes for being active. If I wanted to make that account not active, I'd set it to no. Now by default, account 1 is always active, so they have that one in here for you. But all the rest are blank. SIP server, secondary SIP server, VLF string, SIP user ID, auth ID, password, name, all of that stuff you can enter in. And you have to punch in all of these settings throughout the entire file, and you can see there are a lot of settings. Account 1, account 2, account 3. If you have the 2170, you can have up to 6 accounts. And then it goes through all of the maintenance, all of the time zones, security, provisioning, all of it is in here. Even certificates, all that kind of stuff, phone books. You can program the code, the settings for every single thing this phone has. And you can do that for every type of phone that's in here. Now, as I was saying, if you have a 2130 phone, this thing's still going to have the settings for the 2160. The 2130 phone is only a few accounts, but the 2160 is 6 accounts. And so it'll only use the settings that are relevant to that phone. So if you have a setting in here for account 6, but it's the provisioning file is for a 2130, it's just going to ignore it. In the same way, the P codes carry through. To show you that real quick, I want you to see this is a GXP 1600 series, right? And if I go down and pick a random setting that's on this phone, we'll say, there we go, count 1, SIP settings, SIP registration. P31 is for SIP registration. If I go into a 2160 and I look up P31, I can do Control F to find and type in P31 SIP registrations and our count with 1 SIP settings. It's the same P code for the same setting, even though it's 2 different types, 2 different models of phone. And for the most part, they carry through. So if you have a P code that's for the 2130, it's likely the same P code for the 1600 and the 1700 and the 1400. It's possible it can change. It usually doesn't. So after you have your config templates, I'm going to back this up to the downloads folder. You pick the one you want and you put it in a folder of your choosing. In this case, I've grabbed the 1600 config and I've got it in my folder already, so I don't need these config templates that I downloaded, so we're going to get rid of them. The other thing we downloaded was the XML configuration file generator. Again, I've already downloaded this. I have it sitting in this folder here that we're going to work on, but I want to show you what it looks like when you download it. So when you download it, extract the file, and in that folder is 3 things. The generator itself, a PDF file that shows you the instructions on how to use it, and some example files. A config example is going to have a bunch of settings. It's going to explain what it needs in it. It doesn't actually show you. My example will be better. And it has a mac.csv file. And it doesn't have to be named Mac. Mac is just a way for you to know that that you're going to be putting MAC addresses in here. So, open. There we go. And this is what it looks like. It's just a CSV, a comma separated value file. And these are your samples. You start by putting the MAC address in the first column, user ID, password, auth ID, SIP name, and then you can do a whole second set if you need to. And you can even statically set the IP address of the phone. If you don't put a setting in, it just doesn't use it. And we will go through what that looks like as well. So I back out of here. I'm going to go ahead and get rid of those because I don't need them anymore. But that's where you get them from. Now, if you log into this phone behind me, and we this is the phone behind me. If we log into this phone, all of these settings, count 1, SIP settings, count 1, general settings, all of these settings can be programmed with those P codes. Right now they're empty. If I go to maintenance and upgrading and provisioning, oh, is it upgrade? Yeah. You can come to this config file section and you can download the device configuration. And you can also upload device configurations. This file is different than the provisioning files, but if you download it, it will give you information. It will give you this exported config. And it'll look something like this. It takes all of the P codes that have been set on that phone, and gives them a value. And we could look them up, what each one means. We don't know what they mean. We don't know what P245 is, 455 is, but we do know what P331 is, and that's the SIP server of probably account 1. And you can go through and see all of these, and if you export one file from one phone, you can upload that to a different phone and get the basic configuration into that phone using this system. This is not what we're doing today, but it does give you a quick way to get all the P codes that are currently on that phone if you want to see them for some reason. What we're going to be doing is upgrading these phones using this path right here. So we're going to set it the config path to HTTP, and we're going to put in the provisioning server, myserver.com/whatever folder you've put that provisioning file in. And we'll go through this again later, but I just wanted to show you this is our end goal. We want to put this information in, reboot the phone, and boom, it grabs an XML file and uploads all those P codes to the phone without us having to do anything. So the only thing we have to do is set this. The other option is we can set DHCP option 66, yeah, one of these guys, which is on by default, so that it reaches out to the firewall and says, hey, do I have an option 66? And they say, oh yeah, we do. And option 66 tells it, you're going to go to this server down here and check for a config file. So all you have to do is turn your phone on without entering anything. Option 66 checks the firewall. The firewall tells it, go here to this provisioning place. It finds its config file, downloads the config file, and then puts in this config server path for you so that every time it boots up again, it checks for a new config file. So that's what our goal is here. We're going to start, like I said, you download those 2 files, get the generator in a folder with a default config file that you want for basic settings, and a MAC file of all the phones you want to upload, and we're going to use those 3 things to generate our XML files for provisioning. So without further ado, we'll move on to doing that. All right. Let's go through how to generate and use your provisioning files for Grandstream phones. To start, again, you will need the XML generator that Grandstream provides. And I'm going to go through how to use all of these pieces to accomplish what you want. I did include a link here to download the XML generator if you shouldn't have it. Otherwise, you get it on the Grandstream website, which I've gone through already. And I have provided a folder full of stuff here that already has all of these pieces ready for you to use. So this folder here is called My Finished Files. This is where my XML files are going to end up when I'm done. Then I have the generator. The generator, if I double click it, looks like, if it comes up here, this. We'll be filling out the config template path, the output path, and we will be filling out the MAC address with SIP credentials path, and then we'll run it, and it will spit out our XML files. There's also ways to do it manually on the bottom using inputs and stuff like that, but we're not going to do that today. We're just going to do the top half of this, so we don't have to worry about anything here on the bottom. Minimize that for now. I have grabbed my config file, and not only have I grabbed it already, I've already pre-configured it with most of the settings that we're going to need, and we'll go over those as well. I have a MAC file we're going to look at, and I left here the PDF file that explains how to use the program. So to go through our 2 lists here, we have 2 Word documents. These are the settings that that you may wish to configure in your phones, and the yellow ones are ones that need to be reprogrammed every time you do provisioning. You need to double check, is this what I want? If it is, then you're good. If it's not, you need to make the appropriate changes before we begin. How do we make those changes? In your pre-made folder, you will find 2 files that you need to edit or use. And we've already talked about those. It is the MAC file and the config file for the phone. Now that config file is going to be for all of the phones of that model, not just one. The file called gxp16xx_config default is the config file we're going to use. You will use any text editor to edit this file. I used Notepad, works just fine. You add the P codes you need after the equals sign, and then save the file. First is a default template that will have all static and general settings pre-configured into it, but you will need to change some of them that we've just mentioned on this page over here. Things that we've included is provisioning server, date and time, web access, keypad restrictions, phone books, stuff like that. Over here you can see the phone book settings that we're going to mess with, and I've attached the P code that each one of these uses so we can look it up and check the setting. The provisioning server, web access, the security for the configuration of the keypad menu so it can only use basic settings rather than everything. Each of these will have a P code that sets it and can be altered if needed. In general, they should never really be changed unless you are changing companies that you're working with. So if you have one company that uses all these phones, you can keep the time zone the same, the usernames and passwords the same for the phone books and the config server, all that, and all you'll really need to change is this top part. And this top part is filled out in the MAC file, not the config file. Hi, quick correction here. I'm going to interrupt this video and let you know that the SIP server I had originally said is on the MAC file. It is not. It is a P code, P47 on the config file. So it's a preset server. It should never change for you, and you just adjust it per customer. So over here we're going to move it from down here, the SIP server. Ooh, too much. Get that out of there, and that does indeed come up here to join them. Oh, here. SIP server. So we're just going to move that down there so you guys can see that change. Everything else is still the same, but the SIP server is on the config file and not on the Mac. So make that change and correction and continue with the rest of the video. So everything from settings on down is configured in the config file. Along with these settings, I have included a list of my personal favorites that I use when it applies. It doesn't always apply, but oftentimes it does, and I will go through those as well. So the other file is called a MAC file. Mac.csv is what it's called. Use whatever you prefer to edit CSV files with. I use Excel, works fine. You can use any other, you can use Notepad even, as long as you can edit the file correctly. You will see sample entries or old data that you can copy over or remove in this file, and that is okay. You do not need to leave anything in this file except for the titles, which I'll go through as well. So this is a spreadsheet with variable information you need to set for each phone, and that is what is listed here in the top. The account name, SIP server, SIP user ID, auth ID, SIP password. The SIP server could actually stay the same if it was going to be with different phones, and that would be okay, but everything else should change. To create these files, let's take a look. So we're going to open these files and change the appropriate settings, and then we're going to save the files with new names. Then we're going to open the generator and follow these instructions. Once we're done, we'll talk about how to configure the phones themselves. So let's start with this. We're going to open the files and set them up to be what we want them to be. So we start with this 16xx config file. I open it up, and your copy may have a list of about 1/10 of this document that shows all of the config changes they've made since the previous firmware version, and that is normal. That is okay. Once you get past it, you will get to account settings, and you will notice that there is no pound sign or hashtag sign in front of this P code here, and that's what lets you know that you're at the start of your template. So each one of these controls a setting. To start over here, account equals yes, they put on here, and that just means that yes, this account is active, and that's what this P code does. P271 is the first P code, and it's also listed right here to show you that that's on by default. Now, whether you leave this on or not doesn't matter, because we're going to configure this first section using the Mac file, not this file. So it's going to override whatever's here. If we get to account settings for section 2, you'll notice that it's off, because only the first account is on by default. And we have to turn it on if we want it on, and we'll do that with the Mac file. If we go to the next section, the settings, we've got to allow DHCP option 42 to override the NTP server. They don't want that to happen. They want that set to no on all phones. And that is P code 144. So rather than dig through this and look for it, we're going to click right at the top here and go Control F. F is in find. And then we're going to type P144 and find next. And it scrolled all the way through this whole document to the bottom. And here we are under Settings, Preferences, Date and Time. Allow DHCP option 42 to override NTP server. 0 equals no. 1 is yes. Default is 1. I've already come in and changed this setting to 0, as I've done for all of these that are listed in white. The ones that are yellow are the ones I haven't changed. The ones we get to pick and choose what's appropriate for this particular customer or client. So if I go down and look for the time zone filled out, you can already see, if you're looking, it's right here, or at least part of it. And it shows me what the code is for each time zone. So if I wanted to go Central Time, I should do that as my code for the Central Time zone. If I scroll down here, past it all, we'll see a self-defined time zone. Max length allowed is 64 characters, P246, which also matches our P code right over here, P246. So if we come over here and type in P246, we'll find it just the same. It'll take me right to it. So if I wanted to set it to Central, I would do the CST one I found up here, just above me. I want to do Mexico, Central Time in Mexico, I could put that whole line in there if I wanted. If I wanted just Central America, I could do this one. If I want just Central Time, this would be the US one, I believe. And whichever one of these codes you put, find next, takes me right down to it. Whatever one you put here is the time zone that will hold. So I have set it to Mountain Zone right here, and we're going to leave it at that until somebody alters it. If we were to go to P102 for display date display format, as you can see it's right next to us. P102, it would actually move me just a little bit down to the next spot, P102. And I set it to number 1, which is month, day, and then 4 years, which is what they've requested here. And that can be changed to be whatever you want it to be, based on this description right here. Again, all of these pound signs means that when it uses this config file, it's going to ignore all of this information. All it cares about is the ones that don't have a pound sign in front of it. So it's going to see, oh, P102 equals 1. Great, we'll save that setting. So as we go through these, you should go through and check each one of these, P196, P2. Well, that's a very small number, P2. And you'll see that it finds other things that have P2 attached to it. So for something as small as P2, it might take you a little bit to find the actual code, unless you wanted to search for something else like admin password or something like that. But if we go to the top of the document and start at the very beginning, then that's going to give you your best chances to find it. But in this case, it's going to take a little while to find P2. There's P3. Which I'm not going to do right now. So you get the concept, how to dig through and find your correct P code to fill out the setting you're looking for. You could even search words if you wanted, like web access, just to see what it does. Maintenance web access. And there's P2. So there's always a way to find it differently. You could have searched admin password and you'd found it. Web interface would have probably found it. So there's other options than just the P codes to search. You can Control F and search anything you want. Once you've set all of these to be exactly what you want in this file, you can go through the extras. These are relevant because of different nuances that happen within the phone. To go through them real quick, sometimes a phone will pick up network traffic and ring as if it's a phone call. If you go into Account 1's security settings and change it to say check SIP user ID for incoming invite, and you turn that on, it will stop acknowledging those calls and only accept calls that have a correct user ID on their incoming invite. If that for some reason doesn't fix the issue, these are the extras that I often turn on. But if I look for P258, you will find that setting. Check SIP user ID for incoming invite. I have set it to 1 and I have left the rest at 0. Even though I could have validated incoming messages if I wanted, I left it off because it usually only takes that one setting. If you're using the 2100 series phones, the screensaver and the weather and those kind of codes become relevant. In this case, this phone doesn't have any of that, so we're not even going to mess with it. Currency. These phones don't have currency. I'm not sure if it has P1310 or not. It does. So these used to be on by default. They used to be set to 1. And so I would always come in and turn it off because nobody really makes direct IP calls on purpose anymore. And so now they're off by default, so you don't have to mess with that P code unless you see it popping up on your phone. When you go to dial a number, it'll say direct IP, so you can make an IP to IP call instead of a number. And I turn that off so that it doesn't distract people because most people don't use it. On the 2100 series phones, the background light can be distracting when it goes from 60 to 100 and back and forth all the time when you're not using your phone. And so I set mine to 100 because I like it to just be on all the time. I don't want it to dim on me. Use long label is nice. It's on your line key. It doesn't always show you your name or whatever's coming through on the whole screen. It only uses a part of the screen. So I tell it to use the whole label rather than a part of it, and I like that better. One of the biggest ones that helps me is this one. Bypass dial plan through call history and directories. And I will explain what that one means here. 58. Oh. But before I do, you can see I went to search for it and it doesn't find it. And it could be because I'm near the end of my document and it's actually behind me. So if you just flip it to up and check again, you'll see if you can find it, and there it is. So if you ever get a no, I can't find it, check the other direction real quick, and if you still can't find it, then it means it's not in the document. But if you get all the way down and all the way up and you can't find it, it's gone. So I've turned this setting to 1, which is on. Default is 0. And what it does is if you get a call from somebody and your phone doesn't know what to do with the number, like maybe your phone only is allowed to dial 10 digits. So if it sees an 11-digit number, like 1 in the number, or if it sees the plus sign, +1 in the number in your call history, it doesn't know. It's like, what do I do with a plus sign? So it just doesn't send the call. But if it picks up the call from your call history, like your missed call list, it's going to say, you know what? I don't care if I know what to do with this number or not. I'm going to trust that the phone system, not my phone, but the phone system knows what to do with it. So it sends the call anyway because it came out of your call history. Or if you saved it in one of your phone directories, if it didn't know what to do, it'd say, well, I trust my directory, so I'm going to send the call anyway and trust that the phone system knows what to do with that number. And so that's what that does. It allows that to happen without having to log into every single phone and make a unique dial plan to allow for those numbers. And I like to add that one. So that's my list of P codes that you can add or not add based on if you like them or not. I will try to remember to put that in the description as well so you can use them as needed. So once you get done with your config file, we're going to say this one's done. You save it and close it. Then you go to your Mac file, mac.csv. Now, if you're going to make a lot of these, I'm going to rephrase what you should do here. If you're going to make a lot of these files for a lot of different clients or different customers, then you need to save this one as a read-only and make it so that nobody can ever fully copy over it. And then when you make all your changes, you save as a new file. And you would come in and be like, okay, this is my default, so now this is my config file for, rather than my default, it's now company A. There we go. And then we come into our default Mac file. And you can see here we now have company A and we have default. Doesn't always like to open quickly. All right. If you hold down Shift, you can highlight across the whole bit. And then if you double click between the lines, it widens them to the widest name. It gives each one the ability to be read, which is kind of nice. Now, the first column is for your MAC addresses of your phones. So you need to come in here and enter the MAC address of every phone that you would like a provisioning file for. For each individual phone, you give it an extension number. That's the user ID 1. That's your extension number. 99% of the time it's your extension number. Technically it can be different, but it should be your extension number. This password 1 is your SIP password for that extension number. If you're using a Grandstream phone system, you can go into edit the extension and find all of these. They should be complex. They need to be complex. If they're not complex, this is the password people will use that will hack. They'll use it to hack in and start making calls on your behalf. This needs to be complex to stay secure. Make sure your SIP passwords are complex. Your auth ID can be different than your user ID. By default, most phone systems keep these the same. But when you get a company that would like to add extra security, they don't let their auth ID be the same as their user ID. It adds an extra layer of security. If you haven't done that, then your auth ID is the same as your user ID. And then their SIP name is whatever name you want that phone to have, that extension on that phone to have. So this has no relevance to whether you can or cannot make a call. It's just visual. You can do a whole second extension, and you can also statically set the IP address. But I'm going to leave those blank because we're not going to use those. Once you are all done filling out your information, again, if it's a pre-made template, don't save it over the top of it. Make it read-only and make them save as and give it a new name. We're going to call it Mac A for company A. Just keep using my comma separated value format, and then I close the file. Now we have our company A config file, and we have our Mac A CSV file, and we go to our generator. Configuration template. That is our config file. As it goes in, you can see that it won't even notice the Mac files. It just looks for anything that's TXT file. And we're going to use the one for company A. The output path, where do I want these to end up? And that's, like I said earlier, that's going to go into my finished files folder. So I select that folder. We could encrypt the files with a password, but we're not gonna. We're gonna come down here and we are going to browse the Mac file that it's looking for. So we pick our Mac for company A, and when you have those three paths in, you simply hit run with CSV as input. It grabs the config file, it grabs the Mac file, takes the relevant information, puts them together, and kicks out an XML file for the MAC address of each phone that you want to use. So if you had 100 different MAC addresses in this file, you would have 100 different files in this folder. These files are the files you put in your provisioning folder on your provisioning server that the phones are going to eventually point to. It will look and it'll find its MAC address, it will get its credentials, and you'll be good to go. If you try to open an XML file, most computers won't know how to do it directly, but you can see here each P code has a value. P270, that was my name, I put Johnny in there. The black ones are all the pieces that it changed and where it put them in. Passwords, usernames, auth IDs. All that information gets put into this provisioning file with information next to it, but that's all hashtagged out, so it doesn't care. It's just looking at the P codes all the way through, and it's a long file. Now, XML files, you can't just come in and edit. It doesn't work like that unless you're, it just doesn't work like that. You don't go in and try to change the XML file that you've already got here. If you decide that phone needs a different provisioning file, you come back here, remake its config file, give it a MAC address file, and recreate the file using the generator. So my recommendation is to not let this folder, my finished files folder, be your provisioning folder. Let it be something separate. You come in and you take these files and you cut them out of here and paste them into your provisioning folder. So the next time you come in and make new files, it's an empty folder that you have to work with every single time. Once you get your provisioning files in the folder of your provisioning server, you come and do, how do you configure your phones? Well, to start, if it's not an out-of-the-box phone, I would factory reset the phone. Verify that the files are in your provisioning server correctly. You have two choices. You can log into the phone over the web interface, or you can try to do it on the phone interface itself by going to settings, advanced settings, and upgrade. In fact, I'm going to double check that right now. System. It's actually system upgrade and then config server. So I'm going to change that right now. System. Upgrade config server. That's on the 1600 series. The other one was for a different series phone. You change the upgrade mode to either HTTP or HTTPS based on what you want it to have on your server. That would be this setting here, which we will also be in our provisioning server, but on the phone you have to tell it right off the bat what it's going to do. To look at that in the web interface, you log into the phone, defaults are admin, and you go maintenance, upgrade and provisioning, and you scroll down, and this is where you set HTTP or HTTPS. You put the full server name in with the name of the folder that you have it in, so it knows where to look. If it's on the root of the config server, then you just put .com and you're set. When you save and apply and then reboot the computer, it's set right here, firmware upgrade and provisioning. Always check for new firmware. So every time it boots up, it's always going to check for new information. And if it sees that config file, it'll download it, it'll upload all the settings to the phone, and away you go. If you set it in the phone itself, that works just the same way. It's still HTTP or HTTPS, it still needs the server address, and then you save and you reboot the phone. The phone will boot back up and look the same. It can take a few minutes to grab everything. I'd say give it 15, it should only take a couple, but it should grab it and you should be good to go. I'm messing up my files here. Oh man, we'll fix that later. There we go. Why would it do that? All right, we'll fix it later. All right, so you've created your provisioning file, you've put it on your server, you've entered it in the phone, you reboot the phone, and that's all there is to it. If you have questions, don't hesitate to reach out to us. My information will be listed in the video. So thank you for tuning in, and if there's anything else we can do for you, check us out at n2vs.com or any of our sites. Email us, call us. We are here to assist. Have a good night.